Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. Someone else, even more special to me, obviously, has passed away. My mother, Flora Margaret Crombie. And I wanted to take this opportunity, since it's my gig with this radio show, and pay a tribute, if I could, to my mom, Flora Margaret Chisholm Crombie, who passed away just before Christmas. This is the eulogy that I was honored, along with my sister, Karen Dodds, to give at her celebration of life. Family, faith, creativity, nature-loving, intelligence, strength, and love. My mom, Flora Margaret Crombie, was a woman of faith and family, a creative artist, a nature lover, curious and smart as a whip, strong and mentoring, the personification of love. Mom was born in Weston, Ontario in 1932, the youngest of three to her father, William Murdoch Chisholm. Grandpa was an advertising executive who came from Cape Breton to Guelph and met his wife, my mom's mother, Laura Nixon. Grandma was a farm girl from St. George, born on a heritage farm to forefathers that were United Empire loyalists that came from the United States and stayed loyal to the King in the War of Independence in the United States. As she grew, she looked up to her fun-loving, much older sister, Joy Ranney, who married a U.S. Army gent that she met on the Alaska Highway during World War II and moved to the United States, raising three military boys, and who then got very involved in democratic politics, which led to some really interesting chats when she visited my political family. Joy's son, David, and wife, Sophie, came to visit just a few years ago, and it was like it was just a year, not a decade, since Mom had seen them last. She really admired her big brother, Art Chisholm, who became head of cardiology at Sunnybrook Hospital in Toronto and raised with our Aunt Mary 5 very smart children, 4 daughters and a son. Mom always excelled in keeping up family relations, making friends and being a friend, a very good friend. She kept in touch with some of her friends from Western Collegiate her whole life. She graduated top of her class at Victoria College, University of Toronto, in art and architecture. Mom and Dad, David Derek Crombie, met at Jasper Park Lodge in Alberta, working for the summer while in university. She from Toronto, working as a waitress in the restaurant, and Dad from McGill, working as a valet driver to start with, I think. The chemistry was evident right from the start. Mom offered, so the story goes, to put an eczema on Dad's sunburn the first time they very met. And this was the decade. This was the start of a decades-year love story. And Mom and Dad remained close friends with a number of other couples who similarly had their start meeting at Jasper Park Lodge. They often returned to the Rockies and to Jasper in a small lodge they loved called Skokie Lodge, I think. They hike into and love the mountains and the Rockies. Mom believed strongly in family. In some ways, she was very much the typical housewife of the 1950s and 60s. In Beaconsfield, a suburb of Montreal, my older brother David, Karen, and I would come home from school for a hot cooked lunch. We would play anywhere on our block after school, just needing to go home when the whistle blew 3 times, our own personal signal. We'd play road hockey, kick the can, and skate on La St. Louis. Dad was met at the door each workday with a kiss at the door and a delicious dinner ready to serve, always at the dining room table. But even then, my mom always had one day a week or more that she would spend volunteering at the Montreal Museum of Fine Art or with the Women's Junior League in Montreal. Mom was proud of all her children and grandchildren and was the glue that kept our family together as we spread across the country and at times across the continent. She kept in touch with family and friends from across the world. She admired her uncle, Harry Nixon, Premier of Ontario during World War II, her cousin Bob Nixon, who was the leader of the Liberal Party during most of the 60s and the 70s, and Bob's daughter, Jane Stewart, who became a minister of the Crown in the federal government. We went to visit Bob and Jane and family just a few years ago, and the stories went on for hours and hours and hours about cousins and visits to the Nixons' farm in St. George and the Chisholm acreage in Weston, the Hoskins farm in Claremont. It was wonderful. We went to see that Nixon Heritage Farmhouse in St. George, where her mother was born, and shared a small crib with her brother, Harry Nixon, who, as I mentioned, went on to become premier, in a very small cottage on a farm site. And the gravesite there where her grandparents and great-grandparents are buried. On the way back, she detoured into the cemetery in West and North Toronto, where her parents, Laura Nixon and William Chisholm, and her favorite Aunt Lena, all from Cape Breton, are buried, and asked if I could remember this spot because she wanted to join them there when it was her time. Family. She became great friends with both of her husband's siblings and spouses, visiting Anne and Stuart Goldsmith in Long Island, New York, Florida, and Brome Lake, Quebec, and Mike and Mary Crombie, visiting them in Vermont and Calgary, and numerous trips to the Rockies. Mom came to take care of my son Alex, both times when first Jonathan was born and then Natasha were born. Mom often took care of people. Mom cooked great meals. I remember rare roast beef, popovers, and tiger cake the most vividly. She always wrapped all the presents and contents of the Christmas stockings, hosted these big Boxing Day parties in Markham, ham, scalloped potatoes, leftover turkey, and these incredible cheese cookies with olives in the middle. I loved them. She made a great deal of everyone's birthday. Everyone had their own special birthday cake. She cooked hot dogs over open fires when we were skiing in the Laurentians out in the woods off the ski line. She steamed clams over fires in Cape Cod at Nickerson State Park. She mastered cooking on the Coleman stove underneath a tarp in the rain, and treasured camping trips in tents, and then tent trailers, and even before all that, in lean-tos that we'd have to hike into with all our provisions. Mom was great at preoccupying us on great long car trips with games of I Spy and Who Am I? Just this Thanksgiving, she pulled out some old family pictures of great-grandparents and an old family Bible and spoke fondly about her family and many memories. She loved the pictures of her grandchildren that were posted there on her fridge that she looked at every day, and her family in her living room. Every Sunday evening, she would have dinner with my sister Karen and brother-in-law Jim. Every Sunday morning, she'd join my brother Colin and his partner Philip in church via Zoom in Seabright, Nova Scotia. And every spring and fall, Colin and Philip would come up from Nova Scotia to help her with her lawn furniture, and her garden. Every Tuesday, my brother Dave and his partner Kathy would chat with her about the goings-on in the bookstore in Mulhurst Bay, Alberta. I made a habit of FaceTiming her when I went to a different place on business or on holidays, and she loved seeing the sights and telling me when she had been there or what her memories were of the place. And I cherished many wonderful dinners with her. She often referred to them as our date nights. Karen was the closest geographically to Mom and took on most of her care, and for that, all of the rest of the family will be eternally grateful. But she also got the most time with my mom, and that was probably very special. Mom was the glue of our family. Mom personified family. Faith was critically important to Flora Crombie, but she didn't force her faith on people. She just lived it, and it shone through brightly. When going through a challenging time in my own relationship with God and religion, Mom gave me this book about this radical political Jesus, I think written actually by a Muslim, that she believed in and that spoke to my social justice political side. When questioning another denomination's attitude toward gay marriage, Mom took me into the church she went to in Orleans, Ottawa, Ontario, and showed me a banner that I think she had helped prepare, and that read something to the effect of "All are welcome at God's table," that pictured numerous different colored hands, all embracing. When asked to say grace at family meals, she always had the most profound and personal things to say to us and to God. Flora Crombie loved coming to church, loved the people at church, loved being involved in the life of church, and loved Bible study. She attended many lectures by different theologians, Christian, Jewish, and Muslim. She loved many aspects of the church: the music, the presbytery, the bazaars, philanthropy, and cutting mittens for a cause. Over the past few years, she deeply missed meeting with the congregation during coffee hour. At the kitchen or dining room table, she didn't shy away from the tough issues. We discussed the virgin birth, life after death, gay marriage. Everything was open for discussion. And she had some surprisingly radical and modern views, but cemented in her understanding of the Bible and Jesus' life. She called herself a New Testament Christian. She loved the United Church, New Creed. She was president of the United Church Women's Group and Church Council in St. Andrews in Markham. She led contemporary worship services in Markham when we were teenagers, and inspired people in a seminar series called A Practical Experience in Christianity. And with her lifetime example, showed all of us how to live a life of faith and service. Not maybe for everybody, but for me, it really spoke. My mother had incredible faith. a faith that inspired me, and I think many others. Mom was creative, always making something artistically. She had a lifelong desire to teach people art appreciation. She went into many Ottawa elementary schools with art from the National Gallery of Art and discussed different pictures with them. Indeed, at Andrew and Lauren, my niece and nephew's school, she was known as the art lady. She was a docent at the Art Gallery of Ontario in Toronto and a docent at the National Gallery in Ottawa and also in Montreal when I was just a toddler. She painted, she made batiks and banners and sewed. Through the early part of the pandemic, some of you may have watched, she did 6 art appreciation shows for me for this radio show on Canadian art, Mother's Day art, Easter art, and Indigenous art. These efforts pulled the whole family together, with my brother Dave suggesting different works of art, Karen helping to edit her remarks, and Colin, my brother, putting all the pictures together in a PowerPoint show. And me then having the pleasure of interviewing her. She amazed me at how much research she did. She amazed me at how many of the artists she knew, and if not personally, very well. The best art experience I've ever had, and that I think probably anyone could have ever had, was actually going to an art gallery with my mom. I remember her once taking me to the McMichael Gallery of Art in Kleinburg, and she knew every group of 7 artists' history and their work, but then she had this whole long story that she told me about the females that were painting just around the same time and that were not allowed to join the group of 7. And she exclaimed that they were just as talented. And then she showed me their work and told me their stories. And they were just as talented. And the art is spectacular. Mom would educate us on how to look at art from different angles, different distances. Was the subject centered or off-center to show movement? What inspired the subject? What inspired the artist? And most importantly, what did the piece say to me, to us, to the observer? She always wanted to know how art impacted you. How did it make you feel? What it made you think about? My mom was a creative, an artist. Mom loved nature. Mom and Dad hiked and climbed and fell in love with some faraway cabins and lakes. During our time in Montreal, we camped every summer. Saranac Lake in New York, Nickerson State Park in Cape Cod. And then in Toronto, we continued at Bon Echo, Kilbour Park in Georgian Bay, the Moon River in Muskoka. Mom always diving in and swimming across some bay or some lake to an island and then back again. Mom loved the Canadian Shield, both artistically and to canoe, hike, and camp on. As a young girl, she would take the train from Weston to Gravenhurst and then boat to Port Carling in Muskoka for the summertime. Dad and Mom and sometimes cousin Judy would take week-long canoe trips in Killarney. Mom's house backs on a ravine in Orleans. Our house in Markham also backed on a ravine. Breakfast or lunch in Mom's kitchen always included a discussion of the visitors, of the ravine, the garden, and the wildlife, the birds, the squirrels, the foxes, the deer. Just a few months ago, I was visiting and asked if she needed anything, and the only thing she wanted was birdseed for the very fancy bird feeder that her son-in-law Jim Dodds had put together so that the birds could visit her all winter long. Mom traveled the world, often after my dad passed away, on elder hostels, where she would visit churches, art galleries, and the parks, gardens, and nature of the places she went. My dad collected rocks. Mom collected experiences. Can you imagine she snorkeled on the Great Barrier Reef? She saw the Great Wall of China, the pyramids of Egypt, zebras and elephants on the shores of the Zambezi River, all when she was over 65. She always commented on sunsets, on water, on flowers, on birds. At Thanksgiving after church just 3 months ago, she made me drive her down the edge of the Ottawa River so she could see the colors of the changing leaves across the river in Quebec, stopping at some new cute restaurant for brunch. Mom loved nature, canoeing and camping, and watching wildlife. Mom was smart. Did I mention she graduated top of her class at art and architecture at Victoria College? She played bridge very competitively, did Wordle every morning, and completed the big Globe and Mail cryptic crossword every weekend with a little help from her family and friends. She read voluminously. She was in several book clubs, often passing on recommendations, books and her opinions to us, urging us to read a lot and often. She studied the Bible. She studied art. She studied politics. She studied people. Mom graduated in a world where most women became mothers and wives, and Mom was great at both of those occupations. But I always wondered what she would have been if she had stayed in the workplace. But given that she was there every lunch, every evening, every weekend for me and my siblings, and we benefited greatly from that. Selfishly, I am extremely glad that she dedicated her life to us. In my application to graduate school, I wrote that the best seminars I'd ever been to were at her dining room table. Mom always prepared a great dinner, and together Mom and Dad always ensured a lively, educational, often spirited, opinion-oriented dinner table conversation. With kids that went into religion, my brother Dave, science and health, my sister Karen, business, me, and engineering, my younger brother Colin, we all benefited from and were stimulated by those dinner table conversations, often on politics, current events, religion, or esoteric topics like rocks, art, our family's history, and life. The tradition of incredible dinner table discussions, I think, has been passed on to the next generation, probably much to the despair and chagrin of current partners of several children and grandchildren. My mom, our mom, was one really smart lady. Flora Crombie was strong, and she inspired strength in the rest of us. She was a huge supporter of women in science, in politics, in the church, and in our family. When I wanted to give up a good job and life in Toronto and take a chance on an education in the United States, Mom was my biggest supporter, even when other people doubted. She inspired so many people. She suffered a terrible fall when she was working in Jasper as a college student, very badly breaking a leg, and suffered the rest of her life with issues from that. She fell down some stairs just 7 years ago in Ottawa and broke her hip quite badly, and we were at the time extremely worried for her. She fought back through both those challenging times with rehab, walks and swim fit, chair yoga, and still lived on her own till the age of 90, walking up and down that circular staircase in her house several times a day. She lost her husband almost 30 years ago, and just this year, for the very first time, did she mention to me how hard that loss was and how she was in a phase for a while. She supported us all through career challenges and family breakdowns, always with an encouraging talk and love, and sometimes with some strong recommendations on how to move forward. In the past years of the pandemic, she really felt the loss of social interaction with her bridge, book, swim fit, and church families, but she adapted with regular internet connections. For several years prior to COVID, I had a job in Ottawa that took me from Toronto to Ottawa every week for work. And every second week, I would take her out for a wonderful restaurant meal. Last Mother's Day, she shed a tear when we went out for the first restaurant meal together in 2 years and said she missed our date nights. I loved them. In the last years, her health was good, but her arthritis became more challenging and painful. She rarely, if ever, complained. She just grabbed her cane, got up, went out, and got on with it. My mom was strong. Mom was love. Mom and Dad seemed to have the perfect marriage. I never heard them yell. I never heard them raise their voice at each other. They supported each other like no couple I've ever seen, as my father had some challenges, employment, health, or whatever, and then some incredible opportunities in politics. He was a trustee in the Board of Education, very involved in numerous community events. As we moved, as they both got involved in church, community, political, and other activities, as parents and then siblings got sick, and as children grew up and flew the nest, sometimes making some decisions that they might not have agreed with. We knew when to stay away when they were being romantic together. They had this fun way of making that clear. Besides my mom's bed today, and in several places in her bedroom today, are pictures still of my dad, almost 30 years after he passed. She supported him and us. She loved him. But she also loved her family and showed it. She loved her church, her backyard, and birds, her country. Her country. She was so proud of Canada. She would recite this Canada speech that a Rabbi Bulka that had taught her a theological course had read at one of the July 1st events on Parliament Hill. And she would recite again that invocation over and over again about love for Canada. Mom wasn't this loud love, huggy person type of love. She didn't make a big noise about her affection. She was a quiet, supportive type of love person. She would end every call with, "I love you." She would hug on meeting and on leaving. She would say grace. She would pray. She would sing hymns, campfire songs, and she would love to chat over dinners. Mom had and gave romantic love to her husband, family love to my siblings and I, but that agape type of love that I think is so critically important in our society to many others, including probably many in her church, in her bridge group, in her swim fit, and numerous other events and groups that she was part of. Mom, more often than anyone I have ever known, personified that unconditional, forever kind of love. Mom was love. This past June, one of Mom's grandchildren got married. Lauren wed Gord, my niece, wed a gentleman by the name of Gord at a beautiful wedding beside this lake at a camp just west of Ottawa. All of her family and all of her grandchildren and partners for everyone were there. The only person missing was my dad. And to have this wedding in nature, which Mom probably loved just as much as Lauren, at a camp beside a lake, with first the rain and then the sun coming out, and even the mosquitoes later on, and a campfire after dinner, was absolute perfection. I am so happy that my mom got to join in that event with all of her family before she left us. Flora Margaret Chisholm Crombie, Mom and Gran and Flora. She lived a great life and has been and will be an inspiration to me and many others. She was faithful, creative, nature-loving, very smart, strong, a family person, and the personification of love. We will miss her, but her memory will keep us on the right path, hopefully keep our family together, inspire my siblings, her grandchildren, many people in her communities, and myself. Thank you for allowing me the privilege of speaking this tribute to my mom, Flora Margaret Chisholm Crombie. Good night.